Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and this is the final day of Guilds of Ravnica previews. Tomorrow we'll get the rest of the cards, and we're going to begin our full set review then, so check that out. But for today, we got another group of cards to recap and analyze for you. Quickly before we get into them, though, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support what we do here at the channel, one of which is our Patreon page. That's down there. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon. If you make any purchases on Amazon, no matter what it is, when you go through that link, we'll get a small percentage. And finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can save some cash while you support us. And with that being said, as always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to all the viewers. Y'all make the channel what it is. So thank you. And let's get into it. This is a Spanish language preview. It's a rare Dawn of Hope. White and 1 enchantment. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 2 if you do draw a card. White and 3, create a white 1/1 soldier creature token with lifelink. Alright, I actually like this card quite a bit. I'm usually not a huge fan of enchantments, but this one has really caught my eye. I think this is actually standard playable. Where do you want to play a card like this? Maybe the Vampire deck? I'd at least want to try it there because I did like the Vampire deck and never really took off. I was a little disappointed by that. I thought it was a cool tribal build. Maybe a card like this combined with rotation, and considering a lot of the vampires are from Ixalan, they're sticking around. Maybe that deck could get there. That would actually be kind of sweet. This is a white enchantment that can lead to card draw. You don't see a lot of white cards that lead to card draw, so you do have to pay attention when they do happen. Yes, it's asking for a little setup. You have to gain some life. You also have to have resources to pay into it in the form of 2 mana. But I don't know if that's going to be super hard for some decks that have a lot of lifelink involved and also have a low mana curve like the Vampire deck did. The other thing to consider is a white and 3 to make the 1/1 lifelink soldier. It's another way to maybe later in the game activate the ability to draw cards, and I do like that as well. Also, just populating your board with a bunch of lifelink tokens can be super annoying at times as well in certain matchups. Maybe there'll be another standard deck that comes along thanks to Ravnica that is maybe Selesnya or White Weenie that uses this, but I have no doubt we're going to see this in standard at some point. Limited, this card's a bomb. First pickable in draft. It's a rare. You're not going to see it all the time. But what I like about this, it is a 1-color card, which a lot of the strong cards in Ravnica, of course, are dual colors. So when you see this in pack 1, this is a great way to start your draft. It leaves you open. It's still good in Boros. It's good in Selesnya. The card's going to be good probably in any strategy. Even just splashing it for 1 white, you might be able to take advantage of it. The activation for the soldier is just 1 white. Commander Selesnya tokens decks, maybe I'd throw it in there. I do feel like you could find value from this card even in that format. This one is a Chinese traditional language card preview. It's Flying Knight. It's an uncommon, white and 7, human knight with flying and convoke 4/5. This is a fine limited card. I don't have a ton to say about it. You'll play this most of the time and be pretty happy with it. It's not a bomb. You're not going to first pick this or anything in a draft pack, hopefully. But the 8 casting cost, considering it has convoke, I think is reasonable. It has evasion. It's got pretty good stats at 4/5. It could do some work for you, no doubt. Inspiring Unicorn. 2 white and 2. Unicorn, uncommon 2/2. When this attacks, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. That includes this one, so it will attack in as a 3/3 while it buffs all your other attackers. That's pretty awesome. This is fantastic for limited. Perfect for Boros because of Mentor. Perfect for Selesnya because of the go wide strategy. If you're going into either of those strategies, this card is going to be fantastic for you. A little too situational and a little too expensive for what it does for standard, but great in limited. Drowned Secrets. It's a blue and 1, enchantment rare. Whenever you cast a blue spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. I do want to point out that it's target player. You can target yourself with this. Maybe you have some undergrowth. Maybe you have some jumpstart and you're looking for value. There are reasons to do that, but I know what you want to do with this. You want to mill out your opponent. Is it good enough? Let's talk about it. Limited, I think it is. It only costs 2. It's not a huge commitment. I do like that. As long as blue is one of your primary colors in your deck, I would say go for it. 2 cards every time you play a blue spell, even if that's every other turn or maybe every 2 out of 3 turns or so, it's going to add up and it's going to put pressure on the opponent. We're talking about 40 card decks here. So either you actually do get to mill them out, or at least it could put some pressure on them where they start making mistakes. They start trying to rush the game a little bit and they leave themselves open and you win that way. The one thing I would warn against though, Ravnica does have a lot of graveyard interactions. You might be helping them in some ways too, at least in particular builds. So you do want to be careful there, but I don't think that's enough of a deterrent to make me decide not to play this. I think I'm still going to go for it. Maybe if I have a really bad game 1, I'll just take it out, but I think I'm going to go for it. I hope that there's other mill cards in here, maybe a common or uncommon we haven't seen yet, just because this alone feels a little unstable. It's a rare. You're not going to find multiples. You're going to be lucky to find one. But if you can find another card or two to complement the strategy, it does get a lot better. It's a good card. I do think it actually could be a good utility for you in Limited. I don't know if I first pick it necessarily, but if I know I'm going to be in blue pretty solid, maybe by pack 2 or so, I'd grab it. Standard mill deck? Well, Psychic Corrosion exists. I think someone's going to try to do it, and I do think it could have maybe at least a little bit of success. We have seen mill decks do well in Standard before. This is a pretty good card, along with Psychic Corrosion and some of the others that do exist out there. So I think it's possible. I think we might see a deck, even if it is just for a couple weeks, and then it gets pushed out of the meta or something like that. That seems to happen sometimes with these decks. But I do think it could see Standard play. Modern, do you want to throw this in that Dimir mill deck? Could it make it a tier 1 deck? I don't know if it will do that. But maybe it makes it a little better. I'd at least want to test it. Gruesome Menagerie. Now, this card actually was spoiled a while back. It was leaked. But I didn't make a video about it. I wasn't 100% convinced that the card looked real. I was about 95% there, but I didn't want to do a video unless I was 100%. But it is real, so we'll talk about it today. 2 black and 3. It's a sorcery, rare. Choose a creature card with converted mana cost 1 in your graveyard, then do the same for creature cards with converted mana cost 2 and 3. Return those cards to the battlefield. I really like this card in Limited because you might not always have a 1-drop, but 2-drops, 3-drops, they should be pretty plentiful in sealed and draft decks. So middle of the game, you should have some in your graveyard to hit with this. And it doesn't target, so you don't have to have one of each. It gets what it can get. So if it just grabs the 2 and 3 drop for 5, I think that's great economy. I'm on board. It's almost going to feel like card draw in a way because you're paying 5 and you're just getting 2 creatures just out of the ether, basically, or I guess out of the graveyard, technically. So that's going to feel good. It requires a little time and a little setup, sure. But by the time you're ready to cast this, I don't think it's going to be an issue most of the time. It's awesome for you. It has nice value. Standard, I don't know about 5 mana there. I do think once you're getting into that territory, you're closing in on like Carnage Tyrants and you just passed Rekindling Phoenixes. It doesn't feel like it's the best thing you could do for 5 at that point. It's a little slow there, but Limited, I really like the card. This one is a Spanish language preview. It's Plague Assassin, a black and 2 human shaman. It's an uncommon 3/2. When this enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Each player who can't discards a card. This is similar to many cards we've seen in the past, but it does give it a little bit of a push here, rolling the planeswalker in as well as the clause about discarding a card if you can't do the other. So I do like that. I'm usually not a big fan of 3/2s for 3 because they do trade down with 2-drops, but this with the Edict effect, I'm on board. I'll play this all the time because of that effect. It's not always going to be perfect. Sometimes your opponent's going to sit down and start dropping little tokens, and you're going to look at this card and be like, alright, I need to side it out. But if you can hit something substantial, or at least semi-substantial with it, especially backed up with some other removal, it can be a good card for you. You have to sack a creature or planeswalker too, of course, but in a pinch, you can sack this creature. So I do play these when I get the opportunity. It's not a first or second draft pick necessarily for me, but it could be a higher pick on common, or at least middle of the pack pickup. Electrostatic Field, red and 1 wall uncommon 0/4 defender. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, this will deal 1 damage to each opponent. Alright, I'm a big fan of cards that gum up the ground in Limited. And this will do that for you. For just 2 mana, 0/4, it's going to stop all those early aggressive creatures. If you're against a Boros deck, for example, this will be great. So even if you don't main deck this, remember it's there if you are in an aggressive matchup. The other thing that's interesting, of course, is especially if you're in Izzet colors, you'll have a fair amount of instants or sorceries. Doing that extra point of damage here or there actually could add up over time if you have enough of them. If you have like 1 or 2, it might not be anything amazing, but if you have a handful of those in your deck, it could make a difference over the course of the game. If this is doing 4 or 5 damage, that starts to become significant. So it's going to be better in some builds than others, but this is a card that I probably see myself playing more often than not, especially if I'm in like red and blue because I want to gum up the ground a little bit. What about Standard? Could it see play there? Maybe out of sideboards. I wouldn't be shocked if there was some kind of Izzet or Jeskai build that is running Burn and Control. Maybe even the Wizard deck, if they have rough matchups against a more aggressive build, that they might want to sideboard something like this in, again, for the same reasons that you would play it in Limited. Experimental Frenzy. This is a weird one. Hang on. Red and 3. Enchantment rare. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library. You can't play cards from your hand. Pay a red and 3 to destroy this. Okay, so really? What do you do with this thing? Well, I don't think we're there in Standard right now. We haven't seen the whole set. We don't know what's coming in future sets. Who knows? Maybe Wizards will create some cards that work perfectly with this. We don't know. But as of right now, I'm not feeling it. Limited? Do you play it there? No, not really. You don't want to close off your hand or take the risk of closing off your hand. Again, there's just no real payout for that right now. Commander, maybe you can make this indestructible and give it away with Zedru or something? That would actually be kind of funny. I thought it was interesting that it says pay the red and 3 destroy, not sacrifice. So you could potentially get stuck with it if it was indestructible. I don't know. It might be something you want to try out. Could be fun. This one is a Spanish language preview. It's Goblin Locksmith. It's a common red and 1 Goblin Rogue 2/1. When this attacks, creatures with Defender can't block this turn. That's actually kind of sweet. I just was talking about a Defender creature that I would bring in against the Boros build. Well, they have an answer to that potentially if they happen to have this common. So this is something that maybe you don't start off with if you're in an aggressive limited deck, just because a 2/1 for 2 might not be the best thing you have. It's not bad by any means, and it actually might be in your main deck, but if it's not for some reason and you think your opponent's going to side in some walls, I would go ahead and throw this in. I might just throw this in game 2 regardless, just to try to stay ahead of my opponent and assume they're going to bring in some defenders. It's actually a pretty good utility card in that capacity. Standard, I don't think this sees play, but maybe a sideboard card again if there is at some point a card with Defender that is problematic for an aggressive build. It is a Goblin. I think that's worth noting too, as we are getting more and more Goblin support. Who knows, maybe someday we'll have a standard Goblin deck again. Hellkite Whelp. This is a red and 4. It's a dragon uncommon 3/3 with flying. When this attacks, it deals 1 damage to target creature defending player controls. I don't have a lot to say about this one. Obviously, this is not Glorybringer. This is meant for the limited game, and it's just fine. It's a 3/3 flyer for 5 with a little ability attached to it. Not a crazy ability, but every once in a while you'll find value there. It is very playable. Not too much more to say about it, though. This one is a Portuguese language preview, Contribution of Power. It's a rare. 2 green and 4 instant. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Do that 2 more times. Okay, for standard again, a little too expensive, a little too situational. But in limited, it's another card that I really like. It's a fantastic combat trick. Instant speed, if you need to use it defensively, you can. But you really want to use this offensively. You can throw all 9 of this power toughness on one creature if you chose. So if something doesn't get blocked, you can just surprise your opponent. Or if you have a trample creature, that'll work too. Or if it makes more sense, just spread it around. This card gives you nice flexibility. It's a big surprise for your opponent, although they gotta question if you have 6 mana untapped what you're planning, and they may play around this to some degree. But if you go wide enough, they won't even be able to play around this. Especially good in Selesnya because of that reason. You could throw +9/+9 on some unblocked 1/1 token with lifelink. You could have a huge turn. This is a rare, you won't see it all the time, but there's a lot of power behind it when you do have the chance to play with it. Generous Stray, green and 2, cat, common 1/2. When this enters the battlefield, draw a card. I always play these in limited. I love creatures that allow you to draw a card when they enter the battlefield. They just replace themselves, and they're always solid. They give you board presence, but yet keep letting you move through your deck. Don't be fooled by the 1/2 for 3. I know those stats look a little underwhelming, but being able to draw a card off this is pretty good. And on top of that, remember what Selesnya is trying to do. They're all in on Convoke, so you can use this to convoke out a spell. Also, the go wide strategies don't necessarily need large creatures because they have buff spells. So this is going to fit in just fine there. Might of Masses. This is a Spanish language preview, but this is a reprint. You can see a recent printing for Magic Origins on the left side of the screen for translation. You're probably familiar with this card. I really liked it a lot in Magic Origins Limited, and I do think it's a powerful card, especially in the Selesnya build here. It could be really strong. You can use it offensively to give something a lot of power and toughness that is trample maybe, or just simply sit back, wait for your opponent to attack in, and then surprise them with this. This always had big moments when I played with it before, and I'm sure that will happen again with this set. It's not necessarily a super early pick. It's at common. You don't really need more than one of these in your deck typically. But if you can grab one of these in a draft or find one in your sealed pool, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Pelt Collector, 1 green, Elf Warrior, rare, 1/1. Whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield or dies, if that creature's power is greater than Pelt Collector's, put a +1/+1 counter on Pelt Collector. As long as this has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it has trample. Yeah, this is an interesting card because it's a 1-drop. And here's what I'm thinking. I'm comparing it in some ways maybe to Experiment 1, but it's not as durable as Experiment 1 was. So I don't like that. But I could play this on turn 1, play a 2-drop 2/2 on turn 2. Now on turn 2, I have 2 2/2s. One can already attack in. That feels pretty aggressive. That's like a real nice aggressive start. good enough to even maybe see some standard play. What's awkward is, I don't know if it's like the green Stompy deck that actually wants this. It's maybe a different type of small aggressive deck, maybe a Selesnya build or something like that. The reason I say that is because I feel like the green Stompy deck, this might get kind of lost in the shuffle because you have your Llanowar elves that will want to come in really fast. And then if you have a Steel Leaf champion, you're not going to want to play this in lieu of that, right? So it feels like it could be awkward at times in that deck, but there's other builds that might actually like this type of thing. In Limited, it's going to be awesome for you there too, for all the same reasons. Just play it early, it gets a little bit bigger. Even before it has Trample, it could be a good sized creature and give you some nice board state in the early portion of the game. This is a Korean language preview. Looks like Thanos, but it's actually Bolt Splicer Mage. This is an uncommon red and blue Vidalcan Wizard 2/2. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery that targets only this, if you control one or more other creatures that the spell could target, you may choose one of them, copy the spell, and it targets the chosen creature. In Limited, I'll play this and probably be pretty happy with it. It's a 2/2 for 2, even if it is 2 different colors. Maybe it's more of a turn 3 drop some of the time. But if I have some instant combat tricks or some sorceries that are going to buff my stuff temporarily, I might find value here. And lets the Izzet deck get a little more aggressive, and it doesn't necessarily have to sit back and wait to use Burn or something like that. And I do think that's pretty cool. Think of this in conjunction with some of the other cards that get buffs when you use instants and sorceries. All of a sudden things start chaining together, you could have a really big turn. So I think that's where this is really going to fit in well in Limited, and more of a utility card in that deck than necessarily a big card on its own. But I do think it's a piece in that cog that could be powerful in the right draft build. And sometimes even your Seal Pool, I think, could pull that together. So I do think it's pretty good there. In Standard, I don't know if it sees play there, just because it is relying on not only this being in play, but at least another creature. Then you have to have something that targets it. It feels a little too specific. Camaraderie. This is a white, green, and 4 sorcery rare. You gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of creatures you control. Creatures you control get +1/+1 to the end of turn. Wow, alright, there's a lot happening here. Let's talk Limited first. This thing is a bomb. I would first pick this, even though, yes, it is pretty strict Selesnya colors here, but I want to build around this card. Create as many creatures as I can, just go wide, get some tokens, and either use this as a win condition, giving everything +1/+1 could help you close out the game, or if it doesn't, gaining the life, drawing the cards. It's sorcery speed, but I'm okay with that because the time off that I take to play this, I'm kind of hoping the life gain will counterbalance me taking the turn off to maybe not do something else. Could open me up for some damage, but that's okay. And then I'll have a whole grip full of cards to be able to retaliate with after that. Card feels amazing to me there. Standard, I'm not quite as confident in it there. I think it still has a powerful effect that gain life could be relevant again if you're taking the time off to play this. But there's too many factors when you're talking about a 6 casting cost spell. Board sweeps are out there. If you just get board swept, it's not going to feel good. If you get this in your opening hand, it's kind of a dead card for a long time. I just don't know if it's efficient enough there. Commander, there's plenty of decks that are going to love this. So many decks are going to be going wide. Selesnya tokens just being one of them. You're going to get tons of value there too. This one's a Portuguese language preview, loosely translated Endemic Troops. It's a green, black, and 1. Zombie Soldier, 2/2. This one's a common. Discard a creature card. It gets +2/+2 and trample till end of turn, but you can only activate this ability once per turn. Okay, it is per turn, so you can do it on opponent's turn too. Remember that for defensive purposes. Might be able to catch somebody here or there. But on its own, I feel like it's a good discard outlet. I really wanted to be able to do this more than once per turn. That could have been sweet, but alright, it's a common, I get it. The 2/2 for 3 doesn't feel good, but I throw away a creature, 4/4 trample. Not bad early on in the game. Might push some damage across or get rid of another creature on the other side of the battlefield. I do feel that this is more of a discard outlet though than anything. I think in Golgari that could make sense because you want to feel your undergrowth. Also, you can pull those cards back sometimes. We saw a card a few moments ago that does that. So I think juggling your creatures maybe is actually what Golgari's trying to do. If that's the case, this is not horrible. Maybe it doesn't always make your cut, but I do think it could make sense in this build, especially in draft. Mnemonic Betrayal. This one's a mythic. Black, blue, and 1 sorcery. Exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. You may cast those cards this turn, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast those spells. At the beginning of the next end step, if any of those cards remain exiled, return them to their owner's graveyards. Exile this. Alright, wow. Where do I begin? Basically, Yawgmoth's will, but for everyone else's graveyard instead of yours? Is that good? I don't know. Is that good? The problem is, It costs 3 to cast, and then you still have to have mana to cast the stuff in the other graveyards. It'd be kind of funny to turn the tables on a Storm player, although if they have that many Storm cards in their graveyard, you probably already lost, unfortunately. But that could be funny if it could happen. Aside from that, what do you actually do with this thing? Standard, I don't see it there, and I'm not going to completely count it out because it is powerful. But you already have to spend the 3 mana to activate, and then you have to have mana left over to play something. What are you really getting at that point? Are you getting a 3-drop out of someone's graveyard or a 3 casting cost spell? Is that good enough to play this and fill a spot in your deck? I don't know. I think it's going to excel, obviously, in Commander, where you have a lot of graveyards to choose from, you have a lot of disposable mana, and you could have a really big turn with this. So it makes the most sense there. Limited, is it playable? Yeah, I do think it is, because, again, games are going to be a little bit more drawn out. You could play this on turn like 7, 8, or 9 and still have enough mana to cast some creature or something out of their graveyard, and that could be good enough for you. Or maybe just steal one of the removal spells to make a hole. So it's a good card. I just don't know if it's realistic to think Standard or Modern or anything like that is going to want to use this, but I think it does have its place for sure. Tajic, Legion's Edge, white, red, and 1, legendary creature, human soldier, rare 3/2 with haste and mentor. Prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to other creatures you control. Red, white, Tajic, Legion's Edge, gains first strike until end of turn. Alright, now this is a card that I want to play in Standard. It's just doing so much for 3 mana. You pay the 3, granted 2 different colors. It's legendary, I realize that can be awkward at times. But it has haste, it has mentor, the prevent non-combat damage clause, so the opponent has to deal with this now before they can deal with your other stuff. Yes, it's fragile, 3/2. But that's all the more reason that it's not as awkward to run as a legendary creature. It's probably going to die a lot to shock and to lightning strike or whatever. And also, you can give it first strike if you pay the extra mana. This is awesome. It's just doing so much. It's giving you versatility. It's annoying to deal with. It just kind of checks all the boxes. An aggressive deck is going to love to have this. Is that a Boros aggressive deck in Standard? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Maybe you're just splashing one of these colors. Perhaps you have more of a red-black deck splashing white. Maybe it's going to be a white-green aggressive build, splashing the red. But I do think, in some way, shape, or form, this definitely sees Standard play. In Limited, it's pretty awesome there, too, for all the same reasons. It's just a solid card. In some ways, it's going to be even harder to deal with in Limited. In Commander, it feels a little more fragile, but there are decks that are Boros aggressive decks that I think would actually like something like this. Here's a split card. It's Flower and Flourish. It's an uncommon. These are both sorceries. Let's look at Flower first. It's going to cost a hybrid mana Selesnya colors. Search your library for a basic forest or plains card, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle. We'll talk about that one first. Sorcery speed, that's a little disappointing. And yes, it's disappointing that it says basic forest or plains. I want to grab a shock land with this. I get it. I'm sure they did that on purpose because they didn't want people digging for shock lands. Not only with that fixed colors very fast, but it takes a lot of time in competitive Magic when you're looking for a specific land like that. So I get it. I know why they did it, but it feels like they really nerfed that side of the card pretty strongly. What about Flourish, though? Does that make up for it? White, green, and 4, sorcery, creatures you control, get +2/+2 until end of turn. Now, that's more of a limited play, but it's not a bad one if you're going wide. Selesnya decks look like they want to go wide. Boros decks also look like they're going wide. This might make sense in a Boros deck because the Flower would support the fact that you might be running red and white and you need to pick up the green for something at some point, right? You have to sacrifice the Flourish for the Flower sometimes because you're having mana problems. So that might be where the card fits in the best, but it will be fine in Selesnya decks as well, obviously, because Flourish is a good way to eventually maybe close out a game for a lot of limited builds that want to go wide. That's where I think this card is really going to excel. Chamber Sentry, this costs X, artifact, creature, construct, rare, 0/0. When this enters the battlefield, it will have a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana you spent to cast it. Pay X and tap, remove X +1/+1 counters from this. It deals X damage to any target. Pay a mana of every color and return this from your graveyard to your hand. Alright, so it's not exactly Walking Ballista, I get it. But I'll play this in Limited. It's a very nice curve filler. It could be a 1-drop if you need a 1-drop. It can be a 2-drop. Maybe sometimes a 3-drop. In extreme circumstances, a 4-drop. It's not always going to be as big as you want. But you know, a 2/2, consider it a bear with upside. If you have 2 different color mana, you play this on turn 2. Okay, you got a 2/2 creature that you can throw some damage at something at some point. That doesn't feel bad at all. It's a fine limited card. Maybe not overwhelming as a rare, but it's fine. You'll play it even if you don't love it. We have another Spanish language preview. It's Gargoyle Guardian. This costs 6. It's an uncommon artifact creature gargoyle with flying 3/3, but it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each gate you control. So another limited card. A flying 3/3 for 6 and limited is not the worst thing in the world. I mean, you don't want to play that. You should have something better for 6, but in sealed, sometimes you don't. So, okay, maybe you play it. Definitely gets better, though, if you have gates. If you have a few gates in your deck, it becomes a little more playable. I would say you probably want somewhere along the lines of 3-4 gates minimally in your deck before this starts to feel good. If this comes into play with 1 gate, a 4/4 flyer for 6, that's not bad. We're feeling better about it. But I start to feel the value once I get to 2 gates. A 5/5 flyer for 6, now we're talking. So the more gates you have, obviously, the better it is. And that is going to go into your decision whether you're going to main deck this or not, based on also what else is in your pool. What about Commander? I always say this, but a lot of people do enjoy those gate decks. Here's another card for that deck. All right, with that being said, those are the preview cards for today. And tomorrow we're going to get the rest of the cards and begin our full set review. So check that out. Until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.